Hey, hey, hey! Here's Captain K. Ahoy, landlubbers, and welcome to my channel. Thanks for joining me again when Captain Concept plays Factorio. So since the last episode, I did the usual. Placed down a bit more concrete to make everything look nice and shiny. Plucked down a few more lights. And did some research. Let's go to the research tab. So what did we do? We researched them robotics. Well, robotics, construction robotics, gives us roboports and robot chests, I just call them, construction robots. Did the same for the logistics robot. And I researched blueprints, so that'll make life easier. I think that's about it, or at least that's the important bits. So let's head back. Here in this bit of the factory, with the electric engines, I set up the production of roboports, and they produce. What are these? These are the construction robots, and over here we're gonna have the logistics robots. They need advanced circuits, and for now we're gonna place them manually in this chest. Oh, I don't have many. Let's grab some. Could always, I don't know, route them from up here, but I don't want too much spaghetti. Might use the logistics robots themselves to place them, the chips here to create themselves, but well, whatever, we'll figure it out. For now, let's do it like that. So we got a few going, we won't need many in the beginning. Right now we're gonna mostly rely on the construction robots to do our construction needs. I also constructed a few roboports in advance. Where are they? Down here. And remodeled the belts a bit so that can be placed here and here. As you saw, I already placed down one down there. This one is currently fixing my walls and my turrets during the attacks. But also, if we look at the big picture, the ports are set up in a way so that they build, so that they flow along the main bus here, and they build a sort of triangle shape. Some people do it in squares like this, so the robots can flow around. I prefer the triangles. It's gonna look like, where's the edge? Here, like that in the end. And now, as mentioned in the last episode, we're gonna do some fancy circuit logic. Now the thing with oil processing is those tanks tend to fill up, and if you use one or the other, as soon as one of them is full, the plant stops working. So we wanna use some circuit magic to control the cracking of oil to balance those tanks so that our oil refinery keeps going. Now there is two ways to do this. One is by connecting a small pump to the circuit network and set it to a condition like, let's say, we have more heavy oil than light oil, so let's start pump that stuff through to the chemical plant that'll then automatically crack it down. Now the way I prefer to do it is by using one of those new fancy power switches. I love them, they look cool, and also they let you power on and off things, like for example, where did it go? Here, multiple chemical plants. Let's say I want to place down a second one here for the cracking of oil. If I place down a power pole here, this one is right now powering both chemical plants, and if I switch this off, it'll also switch off both plants. Also, if you notice to the right hand side, it says drain 7 kilowatt. That means even if it's not cracking down oil, it'll use 7 kilowatt. So by switching off those two simultaneously through that power switch, I'm gonna save 14 kilowatt when not needed. It's not much, but hey, every kilowatt counts. So the way we're gonna do this is by First, disconnecting this power pole from the network. You can do so by hitting Shift and then left click, and now the wire is removed. This one doesn't have power, and that's what we want. Now to hook this up to the network, it's quite simple. We're going to need 2 copper cable, one that connects one of the poles that is connected to the network to the power switch, and 1 cable from the power switch, from the other side of the power switch, to the electric pole. So this power switch now connects that pole to the network, and if I switch it on, chemical plant cracks oil, and if I switch it off, it stops. Now I could set up the same more heavy oil than light oil condition in this power switch, but I want to do it a little more elaborate by using 2 decider combinators that I'm going to place down here. And the important part is, as you can see, these decider combinators, they do need power for their decider logic, and they are just in reach of that pole, while this plant is just out of reach of that pole. So this one powers those 2 deciders, but only if this switch is on. This pole then powers the plants. So a little detail on side. Now, why do we need 2 decider combinators? That's because I want to set up a certain logic that checks first if we have a certain minimum amount of heavy oil in this tank. So I do this by connecting the storage tank to the input of this decider combinator, and then connect the output of this decider combinator to the power switch. This one we set up to check whether heavy oil is bigger than, let's say, 500. So only if we have more than 500 heavy oil, right now it says 187, we shall output a signal of, let's say, C for cracking or conversion of oil or whatever. Now the reason we want the minimal amount of heavy oil in here is so that we have some heavy oil left for the production of lubricant. So only if we have enough, or if we have a certain reserve, this plant can start down cracking. And the second condition that I want is by connecting up the green wire again from this storage tank to that decider combinator, but also the light oil to this decider combinator, and then the output of this decider combinator to the switch again. So this one, if I hover over it, you can now see it has the input signal of the heavy and the light oil. And here we want to check whether we have more heavy oil than light oil. So only if we have more heavy than light oil, it should start cracking, because there is no way to reverse the process. If we have more light oil than heavy oil, we don't want any cracking to go on, because otherwise the higher tier tanks are going to fill up and our oil production is going to stop. So if this condition is true, output a signal C as well. And now I can see this one is outputting a signal C, this one isn't. So only if this condition is true, so if we have more heavy oil than light oil, output signal C, and if we have enough heavy oil to do so, like the minimal threshold of 500, so only if we have 2 signal C, this should kick in. So for that, we're going to set up the enable condition that the signal C right now is on, because C is bigger than 0. But if we set it to C is bigger than 1, like that, only if both conditions are true, we have a signal C of bigger than 1, a signal C of 2, then this cracking will start. And that's it. I set up the same already down here, with the minor difference that here we don't check the light oil. Instead, we check the petroleum gas. So only if we have less than a certain threshold of petroleum gas, it should start cracking. With that, we make sure that these tanks don't completely fill up, because we also want a certain margin so that the chemical plant can continue producing oil. So this produces oil, distributes it to the tanks. Should we have an imbalance, these chemical plants kick in and start to crack the oil, but make sure that this one is never completely empty and this one is never completely full, in a nutshell. Cool, isn't it? And that's it for the oil processing. Now let's head on to another circuit logic that you're gonna love. Up here we have, let's do it like this for now. We have our coal train that's picking up coal from here, and the coal is being filled in those chests. Right now all of the chests are full, so what we are about to do isn't that critical, but let's imagine you have a train constantly arriving to the station and emptying those chests. With a setup like this, the first inserter will pick up everything he can grab and fill up this chest, so usually this chest is full. While the last chest, actually, let's use it to our advantage and disconnect that for now. While the last chest only grabs what's left, what these inserters left, and usually is quite empty. So we have an imbalance of ore, or in this case coal. Now the problem with that is if this chest is completely full and this one is almost empty and the train arrives, when they fill the wagon, we're not getting the maximal throughput, especially with those stack inserters. You know, let's start another research and tier up the inserter size. In the end, they can pick up quite a few resources at the same time, so they can empty those chests quite fast. But if the last one only have little resources, it'll be emptied quite quickly and then the inserter will stop working. So we want them to be filled as evenly as possible. Now there are some very complicated ways with splitters to achieve that. I'm not going to show that here, but it basically involves splitters like this, where the ore comes in and then it splits it to these splitters that then split it to other splitters. And if you need more, it gets more and more complicated because you need to reroute that ore back and so on. So I'm sure most of you have seen those complicated balancers that make sure that every chest receives the same amount of ore. But there is a very easy, very elegant way doing so by using an arithmetic combinator. So let's create that arithmetic combinators, and we're gonna need some green wires and some red wires for that. And the way this is gonna work, let me replace those with stack inserters as well, actually. The way this is gonna work is we plug down this arithmetic combinator, let's say here. And then we hook up the green wire of all of the chests. Let me turn that around. So I connect every chest to the input of this arithmetic combinator. So this arithmetic combinator is reading the amount of ore that's in all of those chests. So currently 5,400. And then I'm gonna set this input, the amount of coal, and I divide it by -4, so that we have a negative number of the quarter of the total amount. So this is always the amount of chests. We have 4 chests. So by dividing the total amount by 4, we have roughly the content of one chest, or what the content of one chest should be. And by applying a negative number, we're going to subtract that from the next condition. So we're also going to set up the output of this arithmetic combinator to each of those inserters, like this, they now receive a the negative number, the negative quarter of the amount of coal in those chests. Now, the thing with the circuit network is if you have an input of a red and a green wire, the system is using the inputs of both wires, basically making an addition, or in this case, because that's a negative number, a subtraction. So if we now hook up every chest with every corresponding inserter like this, what happens is he's reading the amount of coal in the chest, and that amount gets subtracted by the negative number of the average, and that'll give us a number of coal that's left. And now we can easily say if this is lower than 1, you should start to insert. So basically, if we have a bigger amount in the chest that gets subtracted, the signal is higher than 1, so it stops. And if the amount of coal in the chest is less than the average, this will be a negative number, so it'll be lower than 1, and that means that he'll start to insert coal. I can also use the shift right, shift left click to copy that condition to all the other inserters. Oh, and one last thing that I forgot, of course, with this arithmetic combinator, we need to set the output to the amount of coal as well. So we've got total of the chest divided by -4 and output this, and now here we have the readings. This design, by the way, I think is created by Matsuri, so kudos to this guy. And if we now connect this belt, let's see what happens. This one doesn't insert because he has got more in the chest, and they do. And as soon as they would reach the level of this chest, he would start to insert as well. Since we're now using stack inserters, let's boost them a little more. But yeah, excellent design. So it's very compact. It only uses one combinator, and it makes sure that all of the chests have the same amount of ore loaded. I think this is excellent. So again, kudos to Matsuri for this fabulous invention. Now, with all of the research going on lately, our science loop has a little dried out. But since we foresaw this, let's expand our science setup to the full size. I mean, why not? Let me do a little time lapse on that. There we go. We'll fill this out with concrete later on. Also sure we need more signs. As you can see, we can double up all of that to this side, all the green signs to that side, and all of the blue signs to this side, so we can double up the amount of signs packs that we are producing. And now to one last thing for this episode. I apologize if it's slightly longer, but for the next episode I wanted to do a little base tour. So one more thing that I want to do until then. With the accumulators, the thing is, solar panels provide energy, but the accumulators, they remain full. They're not giving off any of their energy during the night, which means that the steam engines will run at full power. And what we actually want is that solar panels charge the accumulator during the day, and during the night I want to use some of that accumulator energy, and only if it falls below a certain threshold, only then I want the engines to kick in. And with that, we're gonna save on a lot of coal. So let me quickly prepare everything for that, and I'll be right back. And here we are again. So what I did off camera is I remodeled all of my steam power setup. Not only did I lay down the concrete, I also remodeled all of this part. So the pump system, the water going through the boilers, is still more or less the same. Then the heated water goes into a storage tank that'll act as a buffer. So even when everything is shut up, this is full of hot water that can then immediately flow to my steam engines, and the flow of the water to the steam engines is controlled by pumps. Now, according to the Factorio wiki, a pump has roughly the capacity of half a pipe. So for one full pipe at maximum flow, you need 2 pumps. And to be on the safe side, because I want power to kick in as fast as possible, I set up 3 pumps. Also, it looks symmetrical like this. Now, if we look at the wiring down here, all of the steam engines are connected in this wiring loop that's feeding the main power network. And down here, these inserters for the boilers, they're also connected to the main network through these little accumulators. They will be very important. I'll come to that in a minute. But the important part here is that there I have a line of poles powering, well, because of the range, also these insert, but that doesn't really matter. That's also why we have a storage tank. But the important part is this line that's only connected via this wire is powering all of the pumps. And this line here is connected to this power switch, and that power switch then is connected back to the main network. So if I set up a dummy condition, if I change this and this is off, then you can see that now none of these pumps are running. That means those steam engines will use the rest of their water, and now we are relying entirely on accumulator power. So now all of this is shut off. Now we want the steam engines to kick back in once we reach a certain threshold. Until then we want to use accumulator power, but as soon as these drop too low, we want the steam engines to kick in again. And the way we're gonna achieve that is by using a so-called SR latch or flip-flop. And we're gonna build one by using a decider combinator and an arithmetic combinator, like this. So basically what we're gonna do is we're running the reading of the accumulator into the decider combinator. This one outputs a signal, let's say C, for the charge that it contains. And this one now is reading C is 100. We want it to kick in when C is, let's say, at 30%. So as soon as this one drops below 30%, I want it to output a signal C of 1. And then we run the output into the arithmetic combinator, And now this is important with a red wire, the output of the arithmetic combinator back into the decider combinator. Now here again, if you use two different colored wires, the circuit network will add the values of both wires, and we're going to use that. We're going to take the signal C here and multiply it by, let's say, minus 45. And then we're going to output the signal C. So what happens now is, as soon as this drops below 100, he will output C with the value of 1. That gets then multiplied by negative 45. That means this input will be the sum of the value below 30 and the negative 45. This one will be the, let's say, 29 and the minus 45, so it'll be negative 16. And that means that this accumulator then needs to charge all the way up to roughly 75%, because the 75 minus the 45 here are then bigger than the 30 again, and it'll stop the output or output a C of 0. And that C of 0 multiplied by negative 45 remains 0. So this one is then sort of reset until it drops below 30 again. Now all that's left to do is grab our last green wire and run the output of this decider combinator into our power switch. And the power switch is set to when C equals 1, it should be enabled. So as soon as this drops, it'll output C, which will then activate the power switch, and the steam engines then kick in as a support. And as soon as they're charged up to 75% again, they will stop. Of course, we can always adjust those values, but that's basically it. Unfortunately, that's all I've got time for today. I'm glad you were with me for this episode. If you like this episode, please smack the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please do, or I'll make you swab the dick. And whatever you do, make sure to always have a hand's width of water under your keel. This is Captain Concept. Thanks for watching.